Hello, everybody. A few days ago, we ran our best of fiction with our best of literary critic, Bethanne Patrick, book critic of the Los Angeles Times, the best five novels of 2025. We're following up with the best nonfiction books of 2025. Bethanne has generously selected five of them. One of the books in the fiction category was a particularly intriguing book called Colored Television by Danzy Senna. A book about race and television and reality in America. And one of the most intriguing nonfiction books that she's chosen is Cue the Sun, The Invention of Reality Television by Emily Nussbaum. She writes, I think, for The New Yorker. She's a wonderful writer. So this really breaches, Bethanne, the hard to define boundary between fiction and nonfiction.
It does. It's really interesting. Of course, the title Cue the Sun comes from the film The Truman Show, because one of the producers in that, where a man's entire existence is on screen, is about cueing the sun to come out. And it is really about reality TV in the United States all the way through. It's not just about reality TV now in 2024. It's about how we used to have things like Candid Camera and other shows that purported to show the reality of our lives. For instance, there was a show in the 70s called An American Family. The Loud family was,
all American families are loud.
Yeah. She says Nussbaum is a wonderful writer, as you mentioned, a staff writer at The New Yorker, and she actually has won a Pulitzer for her writing there. She says that Americans accept the fake the way we accept a little bit of salt in dark chocolate. It's just so delicious, right? We can't stop. So about 20 years ago, about 2023, I think, Nussbaum started researching reality TV, and everyone at the time, all of her colleagues said, listen, this is something that you're going to have to write really quickly because it's such a fad, right? It's such a trend. No one cares about it past this year. Well, they were wrong. As we know, it's just gotten more and more popular. And I love this book because it treats reality TV not as a trend or a fad or something that is completely superficial. She doesn't ignore those things, but she says, why do we love this so much? And I think that it's very, very smart. I think it has some fun facts in it, some fun anecdotes, some not so fun as well, like the time a Survivor producer gave poisonous parasites to some of the people on the show instead of the bugs they were supposed to be eating. So she is very, very neutral about reality.
And I'm intrigued with this book. Angela, I want to get Nussbaum on the show. I know her husband.
Oh, you should. Absolutely.
But when I was reading about it, it sounds like it's a history, and she's as well positioned to write that history of reality television as anyone. But does she also have a kind of theoretical mastery? I mean, is there McLuhan in there and Postman and the other great theorists of the American military entertainment complex, so to speak?
No, not really. This is a book that is, more focused. Nussbaum is, a television writer, and I'm sure she knows about all of that, but she is not writing for a theoretical or scholarly audience. She is writing for a popular.
But I mean, you have to, given that America now, for better or worse, and you and I probably agree on this, has a reality television president. Surely she makes some references to this descent of America into reality television, or reality television's colonization of
Absolutely.
the entire culture and politics in the country.
That's one of the most interesting things that she does, is when she talks about The Apprentice and about how The Apprentice was so incredibly fake. Here we have someone who is, saying, I'm going to make you the boss who is not an actually successful businessman, you know? That's what a lot of people forget about Trump, right? Is that he doesn't really do a great job with real estate. And so she, talks about that and talks about what the producers did. And she talks about the machinations of producers on all of these shows and how sometimes that is what makes things so incredibly delicious for audiences. It's the fakery that adds that salt to the dark
It's
chocolate.
I mean, another term for reality television is wrestling. I mean, of course, and Trump himself
Exactly.
is a master participant and observer of wrestling. It's the media version of wrestling.
Well, and look, Andrew, we've got a WWE executive in the cabinet, right? Don't we?
Surprise, surprise. And so this, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about this.
Okay.
And as I said, I'd love to get a Nussbaum on the show. I think she's probably a hard person to get. But does she talk about the way in which people actually think this? I mean, you talked about Trump earlier, that people believe this is true. Is it designed to be true? I mean, wrestling isn't really designed to be true. When people watch wrestling, they don't think that these people are really hurting one another.
No, no, it's all, we just talked about fiction a little while ago. It's all resting on the audience's willing suspension of disbelief, isn't it? And she does talk about that. And she talks specifically with The Bachelorette, for example. One of the producers says in an interview that what you really want is someone who is, I can't remember the precise modifier, but someone who's really beautiful and hot, but also a mess mentally, right? That's what you want because that creates the drama, that creates the conflict. And so it's a combination of manipulating the casting and then manipulating what goes on during the show's actual production. It's all artifice. Cue the sun.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And the other side, sort of, if it's the right way of thinking about it, of the other side of the American cultural coin, perhaps from reality television, is this obsession with memoir, with people telling the stories of their lives. So many memoirs are written, many of them self-published, because most people's lives are not very interesting. The people who are interested are the writer and some of their friends. But you do include a memoir in here. No One Gets to Fall Apart, Sarah Labrie.
I'm sorry, I'm continuing to laugh because
I'm guessing, Bethanne, that you don't enjoy every memoir you read.
No, but I'm laughing not at Sarah Labrie. This is, and I'll talk about her incredible memoir in a second, but I'm laughing because of course you and I know that I've written a memoir and
whoops, I forgot about that. I didn't of course mean to include you, but yours was a successful memoir.
But what I was going to say is, a lot of memoirs, including mine perhaps, are about people who aren't remarkable or don't have something truly thoughtful to say about what's going on. It happens that my memoir, Life Be, was also about mental illness. And so I was a little hesitant when I saw a lot of the praise for Sarah Labrie's No One Gets to Fall Apart. There are so many.
Schizophrenia, right? A diagnosis.
Right. This is about, well, it's about schizophrenia. It's about it's about bipolar syndrome. It's about depression.
And it's about a TV writer. So it sort of ties back to Emily Nussbaum. I think anyone who writes for TV probably has some mental issues given the nature of television.
But this one, I think, is so special, not just because Labrie's writing is phenomenal, just phenomenally elegant and eloquent, but also because what she's reminding us of is that even in the realm of mental illness, white privilege prevails. This title, No One Gets to Fall Apart, is about the fact that in her world of African Americans, and especially this book is about her mother, her grandmother, herself. It's a lot about the female side of her family. It's about you can't fall apart because you have to keep going. There's nothing that is going to allow you to just lie in your bed forever. If you do, something else falls apart. If you don't seek treatment, something else falls apart. But no one is truly allowed in Sarah Labrie's community and family to fall apart completely. And I think that's a very stark and very important reminder that it is certainly in my family and in the family that I wrote about in Life B, there are people who have more privilege and less privilege, but all of them in my family are white people. And so even if they were, immigrants from here or from there, it's different. It's
But
just
in all seriousness, Bethanne, and you've written about this and you've struggled and you've documented this in your own memoir. Does the fact that you have privilege, racial, sexual, economic, should that be relevant in terms of mental illness? I mean, and the struggle with mental illness, doesn't that only compound it? You don't want to be told, well, you're privileged, so you shouldn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, but here it's really the reverse, Andrew, because when you have privilege, you have health insurance. When you have privilege, you have a different kind of family. You often have family that also has resources, financial, health, support wise. Sarah Labrie is saying, look what happens when your parents divorce. Look what happens when your family members are Black and aren't in the position of being able to help each other in the same way resource wise as a white family. So it's not about it's really not about being white and privileged. It's the opposite, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, it speaks to the increasing shifting boundaries between fiction and nonfiction.
Yes.
Of course, the self is itself, excusing the pun here, a hard thing to pin down.
Yes.
One of my favorite movies of this year was Harper and Will, a book about a movie about transitioning. And you've chosen I Heard Her Call My Name, a memoir of transition by Lucy Sante.
Yes.
This sort of fits together with this shifting sense of the self.
It does.
And the shifting division between fiction and nonfiction, and how, again, America is rooted in continual reinvention, invention and reinvention, physical and otherwise.
It is. And I've been reading Lucy Sante's work for quite a while. And this memoir is so painfully and painstakingly documented that, in the words of my critical colleague, Dwight Garner, it's convincing because it's unconvincing. And what Garner means by that, and what I completely agree with, is that Sante has to push back against a very long life because she did not transition until her late 60s. And it's almost as if she knows, I don't have decades and decades left to complete this task. Is it a Sisyphean task? Maybe, maybe not, but she doesn't know. It's so beautiful. Sante is a wonderful writer, a wonderful observer of culture, who has been at the forefront of what we consider cultural, aesthetic, artistic since the 80s. And I think this is one of the most achingly honest memoirs about transition I've read. And I just want to point out that I'm not sure what month Sante's book came out, but in February 2025, there's a new book from Jennifer Finney Boylan, who is who's written a book called Cleavage, about the difference between men and women, that might make a great companion read to I Heard Her Call My Name.
Yeah, maybe if we had another 5, you would include that one. A couple of quick questions on this Sante book. It does sound very interesting. Firstly, does it explain why the issue of the issue of transitioning has become such a third rail in American politics? Why people are so sensitive on both sides?
No.
And secondly, I mean, how does it touch on the broader cultural sense of reality television, where we don't know the difference between fact and fiction on television. So that sort of touches on our own sense of who exactly we are in gendered or sexual
It does
terms.
touch on this because one of the things that I thought was so authentic is Santé's revelations about trying to look and act as a woman, learning a new way of carrying herself, a new sort of bearing. And for example, in this, I just think she looks so beautiful in that photo. And one of the things that is so tough is she found out, for example, that once the hair in the beard area turns gray, it can't be lasered anymore. I don't exactly know why, but I guess maybe because it's, it's changed at the roots. And so instead of being able to have, some laser treatments and get rid of, beard hair, Santé has to go through this long electrolysis process. And I thought, this is fascinating because, as you were saying with Cue the Sun, with reality TV, it's so easy to be deceptive. It's so easy to pop a wig on this person and, change this person's clothes and all of this sort of thing. But when this is real, when this is your lived experience, when you were meant always to be in a different shell than what you were given at birth, a different gender, it is so tough. It's such a long process. It is not instantaneous. It is not something that a producer can take care of.
Yeah,
It
is
is,
there I mentioned, I'm not sure if you've seen the Harper and Will movie. There's a certain
no,
sadness
Will and,
about
I think it's Will and Harper, isn't it?
sorry, Will and Harper, yeah.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see it.
It's a sad film in its own way. Is there a
Mhm.
sadness to this, or a sort of a triumphant quality to this
Um,
book?
I think there's a lot of sadness. For instance, Santé's partner, Mimi, Lucy and Mimi chose to part during this transition, and that's very sad. That's very hard. And I also think that Lucy Santé is still hoping to fully inhabit herself. It hasn't completely happened.
Although whoever inhabits themselves, the first three of these books are all very contemporary.
Yep.
Another book that you've chosen, perhaps more literary, A Wilder Shore, Romantic Odyssey of Fanny and Robert Louis Stevenson by Camille Perry. Is this a book about? Is this a classic nonfiction literary excavation which suggests that the woman is the genius really behind the male author?
Oh, not the genius. No, I love this book so much. My colleague and friend, Ron Charles at the Washington Post, is the one who told me about the book, which I'd missed. And I'm so glad I listened to him. This is the most fantastic literary biography. I didn't know anything about this aspect of Stevenson's life. And it's not about the woman being the genius. It's about the woman wearing the pants in the family. And, Stevenson was very much the literary genius. After reading this book, and by the way, Camille Perry started the Mothers Who Think. I don't know if it was a blog at first or a column, but it was part of Salon. Maybe it still is. Perry is so smart. And this is an amazing examination of a marriage that happened because two people, an American and a British person, met in France. Stevenson, the British man, was about 30, and Fanny, his wife to be, was about 40. She'd had a marriage and several children. He hadn't. They met in a sort of artist colony. They also became very close to Henry James. And a lot of people considered Fanny Stevenson, this is the word everyone used, that she was a termagant, that she was, just this very ballsy woman who was bossing her younger husband around. But what Perry excavates very carefully, okay, this is not just someone imagining and writing broad strokes the way I do when I talk about books on this show. She shows you through their letters and diaries and through other people's writings about them, that what Fanny Stevenson did is to protect and support and bolster her husband. And she really believed that he was a literary genius. In fact, one of the things that one of the people who reviewed the book said is that if you put all of his writings together, they take up like 3 feet on a bookshelf. He wrote much more than people know. Now, the things we do know of his, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, all of those other books, Treasure Island, etc., those were things that he wrote while Fanny was by his side. She was from Indianapolis. She was very, very smart. She was a firebrand. She nursed him through his various illnesses. And what it shows me, what this book showed me, is that partners don't need to be male, female, wife, husband. They need to complement and support each other. And strict gender constructs don't matter as much as belief in each other. It's a remarkable biography that is very much, I think, in keeping with I Heard Her Call My Name.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's a clear segue, which I
Yes.
missed initially, between the Sante book, which is a book about transitioning, and this division of labor between Fanny and Robert Louis Stevenson.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is a great read.
But is there a gendered element here? It couldn't have worked the other way around, could it?
Well, not in their time. Not in their time, but this is it's okay because they were safe harbors for each other. She was so strong and so determined that she was able to say, it's all right for you to sort of be the person who is more introverted, who languishes more, who spends his time writing. She protected him, and
she was his manager. And
yes,
it's another interesting contrast. We ran your fiction summary a few days ago. Percival Everett, the author of James, and Danzy Senna, author of Colored Television, happened to be married to your best fiction book. So writers, it's not just writers who are married to one another. Sometimes writers and publicists or writers and managers are married to one another.
It's really true. One thing I will say is that almost everyone, including the author of this book, Perry, will agree that Fanny Stevenson's writing was nowhere near the level of Stevenson's. And that's okay. That's okay. She didn't mind being his editor, his amanuensis, his helpmeet, because he gave her a lot of freedom in terms of thought and action and choice in the household. So
yeah, and it adds, in a sense, to perhaps the sadness of the Sante book about everything falling on the self. When you transition, maybe you take on too much responsibility.
That's an interesting thought, a very interesting thought. And I do think that, again, those two books are an interesting pair to read together. I hadn't realized how many of the books, because I've read so many more than these, 5.
Well, you've read so many books, and our final book, Bethanne, of the year 2024. And if I wasn't lazy and found some music to set this up with, we might have chosen Handel's Messiah. And this is a book about Handel's Messiah. 'Tis the time of the year.
It is
like a wonderful book. Every Valley, the desperate lives and troubled times that made Handel's Messiah by Charles King. Classic nonfiction, nothing weird here, no transitioning, no memoir. Just hard literary history. Is it hard cultural history?
Okay, this is classic nonfiction, but we've got Handel, who was, when he wrote The Messiah, a 50-something gluttonous man who was also gay, and really he completed The Messiah. A lot of people, I'm sure, know this, in 24 days, but his entire history and culture and how he arrived in England. He didn't speak any English, but he became this, breakout star. It's almost like he's an elderly K-pop idol, or maybe Bruce Springsteen. It's hard to say. It's hard to
Hmm.
say, but he was really, really
Well,
popular.
Bruce Springsteen isn't gluttonous. He's
Well, no, and nor is he gay, but he was just so prolific. And Bruce Springsteen is still out there performing and composing and songwriting. And Handel was just, I mean, 24 days to put together this whole oratorio. What I love about King's book is that it shows you all of the people around him. From, if anyone's seen the film The Favorite, starring Olivia Colman, where she
I've
plays
seen that. It's a good
Queen
film.
Anne. Queen Anne was Handel's sort of patron in the UK. And then he had a very odd impresario sort of figure named Charles Jenin, who was a book collector, a businessman, and he gave Handel all of these pieces of scripture and said, write something for a chorale from this. And many people have pointed out how odd some of the lines in the Messiah are, such as when one of the soprano pieces, talks about how beauteous are the feet, of these, supplicants, that kind of thing. It's just very, very strange bits of scripture. But who among us has not thrilled to the Messiah? And what I want to say about this book is, not only is it fun to read, it's a lot more about as King's subtitle says, it's a lot more about the times and lives involved in the composition of the Messiah, but it also shows that it's not something that has to be confined to Christian belief. Okay, the Messiah is a thrilling piece of music. It is uplifting. It changes you when you sing it or hear it. There's a reason people love to stand up to sing the Hallelujah chorus.
And
It
that's
is,
why, of course, it's so suitable for the end of the year when we're thinking of reinvention or New Year's.
yeah.
And finally, Bethanne, if you were to read Every Valley side by side with Cue the Sun, about the invention of reality television in the late 20th, early 21st century America, would it make you nostalgic for a different historical, cultural time where people wrote the Messiah rather than the Apprentice, or does it suggest that culture's always been a bit of a dodgy kind of thing?
I think it suggests that culture's always been a bit of a dodgy thing, but I do think the Messiah shows that when you keep something greater in mind, then the work itself is greater. Okay. So, yes, there were crazy people around Handel, there were crazy circumstances, there was a crazy monarch, all of this stuff. But Handel, despite his, I guess he was very, very large when he was in his 50s. He just ate more, drank more than every other, man around him.
In those days, drinking and eating and being fat was not looked down on like it
Yeah,
is today.
absolutely, absolutely. And so even with all of those things around him, I think Handel was sort of like, I don't know if I believe in everything that this scripture says, but it certainly is inspiring. And I think one of the things about reality TV, Andrew, is that there's very little that feels inspirational. It
No, yeah,
feels
no inspiration.
aspirational.
Yeah, I mean, so it's this book then sounds like it's like listening to the Messiah. I have to admit, when we came into this, I thought, if I had to choose, I haven't read any of these books, I'm embarrassed to say. If I had to choose a book, it would be Nussbaum's Cue the Sun. But actually, you've convinced me that if I have to choose a book to read, it's going to be Every Valley, the Handel book. You
I love it.
speak about it in such an interesting way. What would be your nonfiction choice of the
Oh,
year?
this is a tough one, but I think it would be A Wilder Shore, because while Every Valley is a great history and I think really interesting and a wonderful read, I think Camille Perry has thought so differently about the Stevensons and about how they constructed their marriage and their identities and done such primary source analysis that I think a wilder shore would be mine.
Well, Bethanne, Patrick, wonderful summary of 5 of the best nonfiction books of the year. We will be back in 2025 with a lot more from you. Happy New Year, happy reading, and we will see you again in the new year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and Happy New Year as well.
Can I step on the sea?